Far beyond the stars known to humans, in a part of the galaxy untouched by Earth's knowledge, the Galactic Empire ruled with unmatched power and silence. It was an ancient empire, built over thousands of years, consuming worlds and species without mercy or question. Their technology was beyond anything Earth could imagine, and their methods were cold and precise. They had eyes in every system, sensors that reached across light years, and computers that watched for anything that could disturb their control. For a long time, Earth had remained unnoticed, too small, too slow, and too far away from the Empire's core to be considered important. But something had changed. In one of the Empire's deep space observation posts, a new alert appeared on their screens. Something strange was happening on a blue planet in an unaligned star system. A species was growing too fast and too unpredictably. Earth had been discovered. The Imperial Command gathered in silence, their tall figures dressed in dark robes, their expressions hidden behind masks that showed no emotion. Holograms of Earth's recent history floated above the table, images of rockets, satellites, nuclear blasts, wars, rebuilding, and more wars. 1,000 years of rapid progress crammed into a blink of galactic time. The AI observer spoke in its hollow voice. Species 438 human. Rapid adaptive evolution. Unpredictable development path. No hive structure. High emotional variability. Potential risk, medium to high. A pause followed, and then the voice added something that made the entire chamber shift in unease, capable of irrational resistance in extreme conditions. Unmatched survival instincts observed. That was not a trait commonly found. Most species followed patterns. They advanced, they expanded, and then, eventually, they submitted. But humans had not been contacted, and yet they already seemed dangerous. The Empire never feared war, it feared chaos. And from what they saw, humans were built for chaos. Across the Empire, different sectors began reviewing Earth's data. Deep scans from old probes, forgotten satellites, and intercepted broadcasts were gathered. Earth signals, though simple, were full of strange ideas, films, music, stories of rebellion, love, war, and freedom. No central control. No perfect order. Just a world always moving, always changing, always resisting its own limits. To most of the Empire, this behavior was foolish, even primitive. But to the ones who studied threats, it was a pattern they had learned to fear. One historian of the Empire, older than any living commander, stood and spoke for the first time in 100 cycles. "Do not underestimate them," he said in a voice like rusted metal. "We've seen this before. The spark before the fire. They do not look dangerous until it is too late." His words were met with silence. Then came the decision: a recon fleet would be sent. Not to make contact. Not to speak. Only to observe and, if needed, erase. In a distant starport, thousands of light years from Earth, 6 warships prepared for silent flight. These were not full battle cruisers, but advanced scout ships armed with weapons Earth could not even detect. Their orders were clear: scan the planet, measure threat level, report back. If Earth showed signs of unpredictable danger, the fleet would trigger a planetary shutdown protocol, total communication blackout, atmospheric interference, and, if resistance followed, strategic elimination. It had been done before. Quietly. Cleanly. The people of Earth would simply vanish from the galactic stage before they ever knew there was a stage to begin with. The fleet activated its dark drive, vanishing into folded space like ghosts. Back on Earth, life continued without knowledge of the silent judgment heading toward them. People woke up to alarms, rushed to work, laughed, cried, argued, and dreamed, as they always did. Satellites scanned weather patterns, not space. Scientists focused on climate change, not alien fleets. Military powers prepared for human enemies, not otherworldly ones. The idea that someone might be watching, studying, planning from above was only science fiction to them. But in the shadows of the solar system, the Empire's ships arrived, hidden in the cold void beyond Pluto. Their sensors spread out like invisible webs, reaching for every signal, every wave, every whisper of life. The results came fast. Humanity was more chaotic than predicted. One commander aboard the lead scout ship stared at the data for hours. His name was Vorx, and he had studied over 50 developing species. But never had he seen one like this. He sent a message to the Empire. Earth does not follow pattern. Behavior cannot be predicted. Recommend further caution. But his warning came too late. The Council had already made its choice. If a threat could not be measured, it would be silenced. The fleet received new instructions. Initiate silent disruption. Begin the process. No explosions. No battles. Just silence, darkness, and erasure. And yet, something unexpected happened. One of Earth's deep space observatories picked up a strange fluctuation, a signal too regular to be natural. A young astronomer named Aisha, working the night shift in a quiet lab in Chile, noticed it. At first, she thought it was equipment failure. Then, she saw the pattern. A code. Something not from Earth. She reported it, and soon, a small group of scientists gathered around her. They kept it quiet. No one wanted panic. But the message was clear. It wasn't a hello. It was a scan, a measurement, and perhaps a warning. The humans didn't know yet what they were facing. But something in their nature, something buried deep in their history, began to awaken. They didn't run. They didn't panic. They started watching back. And in that moment, far above the Earth, aboard ships built to end civilizations without a sound, Commander Vorx paused. Something about this planet, something about these humans did not feel like a mistake. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous. The night sky over Earth looked as peaceful as ever, stars twinkling in their usual places, the moon casting its soft glow, and satellites drifting silently above. But far beyond the edge of visibility, beyond what any telescope could track, something had entered the solar system without a sound. The Galactic Empire's recon fleet had arrived, and it brought with it no greetings, no introductions, no signs of life. Wrapped in dark energy fields that bent space and light around them, the ships remained invisible to human eyes. They did not emit signals. They did not communicate. They simply watched. Their instruments scanned every corner of the planet with precise, cold focus. The oceans, the skies, the cities, the power grids, and even the digital patterns of human behavior were recorded in terrifying detail. To the Empire, this was not a mission of curiosity. It was an evaluation, a quiet study to decide whether Earth deserved to exist or not. In space, silence was normal, but this silence felt heavier. Earth's satellites began to fail one by one. Some stopped transmitting altogether, others sent back static before going completely dark. The first to notice were engineers at various space agencies. A weather satellite blinked out, followed by an old military one. Then, a scientific probe near Mars lost contact. At first, people blamed software errors or space debris, but soon, the number of failures became too many to ignore. In observatories across the world, scientists began whispering about interference, something invisible, something artificial. Governments grew tense but said nothing to the public. In secret meetings, officials demanded answers, but none came. There were no threats, no invasions, no warnings, just a quiet, creeping darkness swallowing pieces of their sky. In a hidden facility, buried deep beneath the Nevada desert, a team of analysts reviewed intercepted anomalies. The Arc Array, a prototype deep space listening system, began detecting strange frequencies, subtle, coded pulses that repeated with mathematical precision. No natural object could create such patterns. A language, perhaps. A signal. But what disturbed the analysts most was the direction of the signals. They were bouncing off Earth's atmosphere, as if measuring the planet like a test subject in a lab. One analyst, a man named Harris, who had spent his life listening for signs of alien life, leaned back in his chair with a cold sweat on his face. "They're not talking to us," he muttered. "They're scanning us." His words felt heavier than they should have, like a storm had passed through the room without warning. While the scientists scrambled to make sense of what was happening, the people of Earth continued their lives, unaware of what was floating above them. Families watched television, Workers rushed through their routines, students laughed in classrooms, and millions stared at glowing screens filled with news, entertainment, and chaos. But high above, the fleet watched with perfect clarity. They saw everything: traffic patterns, military drills, medical data, internet searches, and even the pulse of electricity moving through cities. The Empire's AI processors compared human behavior to thousands of known species. The results were confusing. No clear leadership structure, high emotional variability, environments full of danger storms, quakes, wars, yet humans continued to thrive. They adapted faster than expected. Their emotional patterns were erratic, but their determination was stable. They feared death, but they were not controlled by it. The more the fleet watched, the more questions arose. The fleet's lead ship, Obsidian Veil, hovered near Neptune's orbit, invisible but awake. Commander Vorik stood inside its observation chamber, watching holographic projections of Earth flicker before him. He had seen dozens of planets evaluated and erased some, without even needing a second scan. But this one, this Earth, felt different. It wasn't just the speed of development or the unpredictability. It was something deeper. Every signal from Earth was filled with emotion, anger, joy, sorrow, hope. Even their most basic broadcasts carried raw energy. Their stories were about fighting against the impossible. Their music carried defiance. Their data was wild, unorganized, yet alive. It was nothing like the cold, orderly civilizations the Empire preferred. There was chaos here, yes, but there was also something else. Potential. Despite his thoughts, Vorik followed protocol. He sent a coded message to the Empire. Phase 1 complete. Awaiting instructions for Phase 2 isolation protocol. The reply came almost instantly. Proceed. Silence the system. Begin full observation lockdown. Prepare for termination if further anomalies are confirmed. Vorik read the message without emotion, but something deep inside him, something buried under centuries of training, felt uncertain. Termination meant erasure. It meant ending all signals, blacking out satellites, collapsing communication systems, and preparing for atmospheric shutdown. Earth wouldn't see it coming. It would just fall silent. And yet, Vorik hesitated. On Earth, Aisha, the young astronomer in Chile, who had first detected the strange signals, continued her quiet research. She hadn't told anyone outside her small circle, fearing ridicule or worse. But now, something new appeared in her data. The signals had changed. They were no longer just scans. There was a pattern: sharp, deliberate pulses, almost like a countdown. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt a chill in her bones. She reached out to a trusted friend in a private science forum, sharing her findings. Others soon confirmed similar patterns. The signals were everywhere, hiding beneath normal communication channels like whispers under a song. Something was here. Watching. It was only visible for a moment, a ripple against the stars. But when the data was reviewed, it showed a structure large, angular, and moving with impossible speed. The astronomers reported it quietly, not wanting to cause panic. But the image made its way into the hands of the Arc Array team. Harris looked at it and simply said, "They've arrived." No one spoke after that. Back aboard Obsidian Veil, Vorik received the last set of scan data. The AI calculated Earth's resistance potential. The result was unexpected: 87%. Vorik checked again. It wasn't a measure of strength or weaponry. It was a prediction of how long Earth would keep fighting if attacked. The average for other species was under 40%. Earth's was almost double. He stared at the number, then at the silent planet below, spinning in the darkness, unaware of the fate being discussed above it. Finally, he turned off the projection and walked away from the console. "Not yet," he whispered to himself. "Not this one." And so, the fleet waited. Invisible. Silent. Watching. Earth carried on, but the air had shifted. Somewhere, deep in human instinct, people began to feel it. A sense of being watched. A sudden cold in the wind. A thought they couldn't explain. Something was out there. Something ancient, powerful and unknown. The Empire had arrived, but Earth had not fallen. Not yet. The truth did not arrive with a thunderous boom or flashing lights. It slipped quietly into human awareness, like a whisper behind closed doors. Rumors first surfaced in obscure corners of the internet, shared by those who had seen strange patterns in the sky or heard secret broadcasts that didn't belong to any human origin. Scientists from around the world, working in silence, began to piece the puzzle together. Earth was being watched. The realization struck hard within the walls of global intelligence agencies, where analysts stared at vanishing satellites, intercepted signals, and inexplicable cosmic movements. But it was no longer just silent observation. There were patterns in the data now, structured and deliberate, as if someone up there was no longer just watching, but waiting. Earth had been judged in secret, and though the judgment had not yet been carried out, the weight of that silence pressed on everyone who understood what it meant. For the first time, humanity was forced to look up, not with wonder, but with dread. Inside the United Nations secret emergency bunker, representatives of the most powerful nations sat in grim silence. No more denial, no more debates. They knew. The threat was real, and it was unlike anything they had ever faced. This was not an enemy that could be bribed or frightened with nuclear warheads. This was an intelligence beyond human comprehension, observing from the edge of space, deciding the fate of Earth as if it were a simple calculation. The president of one major country finally broke the silence, saying, "We are being watched like animals in a lab. If we don't respond now, we may not get another chance." His words were not dramatic, they were honest. That night, for the first time in history, a true global alliance began to form not out of trust, but out of desperation. Secret technologies were pulled out of vaults. Hidden satellites were activated. Weapons designed for theoretical alien threats were armed and quietly deployed. Across continents, militaries went into silent alert, while the general public remained unaware of the invisible storm gathering in the skies above. But not all responses came from governments. In the quiet halls of a university in Tokyo, a young AI researcher named Dr. Sora Nakamura had been studying the unusual frequencies hidden beneath Earth's communication networks. Unlike others, she didn't see them as hostile. She saw them as a puzzle. For weeks, she worked alone, feeding the signals into her AI model. And then, one evening, her system responded. The alien signal had changed just slightly, but enough to resemble a pattern from Earth's oldest languages. Not a message, not a word, but something that showed a kind of curiosity. She stared at the screen, her heart racing. Could it be that the watchers were not just scanning, but listening? Notifying her government would be slow, so she decided to do something reckless. She crafted a reply, made entirely of mathematical harmony, something that could be understood by any intelligence that valued logic and order. She uploaded the signal to an old satellite still orbiting near the moon, aimed it at deep space, and sent it. For a moment, she just sat there, listening to the hum of the machines, wondering if she had just made contact or invited destruction. Across the world, strange events began to unfold. People in remote regions started reporting odd atmospheric behavior, shadows that moved against the stars, strange lights that blinked but never repeated, animals reacting to things unseen. In the deserts of Nevada, instruments picked up a strange tremor not in the ground, but in the magnetic field. It was as if something massive had passed overhead without touching the Earth, like a ghost ship brushing against reality. Deep-sea sensors in the Pacific picked up pulses from beneath the ocean floor, as if the planet itself had become a drum being tapped by invisible fingers. People began to feel it, not just scientists, but everyday people. They spoke of odd dreams, sudden headaches, or a strange heaviness in the air. Some felt fear, others curiosity. But everyone, in some way, began to sense that something far beyond human understanding was now involved in their world. At the edge of space, the Empire's fleet remained still. Commander Vorex reviewed the latest data. Something had changed. The humans had begun responding, but not with aggression. Not yet. The Empire had expected primitive panic, perhaps blind attacks or chaos. But instead they saw silent coordination, careful movements, and most surprising of all, a signal. a message sent not in fear, but in reason. Vorax stood before the projection of Earth again, this time not as a conqueror, but as a thinker. "They saw us," he said softly, "and still they speak." He reviewed Earth's history files again, the wars, the achievements, the failures, the art, the resilience. No empire had survived long by underestimating its enemies, and no empire had ever faced a species quite like this one. The empire's High Council, however, had no interest in conversation. When Vorax submitted his report suggesting the possibility of peaceful contact, the reply came fast and sharp: humanity is unstable. Dangerous. Their ability to adapt makes them unpredictable. Proceed with final judgment. The words rang in his mind like a cold bell. But something in Vorax refused to act. He delayed. Again. He changed the scan schedule, claiming technical calibration. He gave Earth more time, not much, but enough. On Earth, a message came back. Dr. Sora's system picked it up, just a blip of altered frequency, a change in rhythm that couldn't be explained by natural interference. It wasn't a full response, but it was something. She ran to the communication room and stared at the waveform on her screen. "They heard us," she whispered. Others soon joined her, reviewing the data, confirming it. Something had changed in the Watchers. Perhaps a hesitation. Perhaps interest. But it was a beginning. In another part of the world, a retired astronaut named Colonel Rhodes was called in by his country's defense council. They had one question. If the time came, could he pilot a special shuttle loaded with a last resort device, a weapon never tested, built from theoretical science meant to disrupt alien systems? He looked at them and asked, "Is it a suicide mission?" The answer was silence. He nodded. "If I have to protect Earth, I'll fly." And so, the plan was quietly set in motion. Just in case diplomacy failed, just in case the Watchers decided to act. Humanity would respond not just with weapons, but with courage, with unity, with everything it had learned from thousands of years of surviving its own mistakes. Above, the fleet watched. Below, Earth held its breath. The skies were silent, but not empty. The time for waiting was ending. Whether through words or war, the Watchers would act, and when they did, humanity would be ready. In the cold silence of deep space, the Empire's fleet remained still like shadows frozen in time, their massive warships orbiting far beyond the moon, hidden just out of human detection. These ships were not built for intimidation, they were built for swift judgment, for erasing civilizations that posed even the slightest risk to galactic order. But something about Earth was different, something that no data or military protocol could explain. Commander Vorax stood alone in the viewing chamber of the flagship Omen of Order, staring at the blue and green planet below, his expression unreadable, his thoughts racing. The High Council had given a direct command: carry out the eradication protocol, wipe Earth clean before its people could rise beyond their system, before their chaos infected the galaxy. To the Council, humanity was not evil, but unstable, an unpredictable species capable of creating great beauty and devastating horror within the same breath. They were seen as a risk, not because of their current strength, but because of their potential, and it was that potential that had unsettled the cold logic of the Empire. Vorax had always obeyed without question, but now, with his finger hovering over the command that would signal the end of an entire species, he found himself hesitating for the first time in his career. It wasn't weakness or fear that made him pause, it was something else entirely, something he couldn't define. The signal Earth had sent days ago still echoed in the memory banks of the ship, a simple pulse wrapped in mathematical symmetry, carrying no words, no demands, just intention, a peaceful message made from logic and harmony. No species facing extermination had ever done that before. Most civilizations screamed or fired blindly or begged, but humanity had replied with reason, even while unaware of the full threat above them. That response had left a crack in the foundation of the Empire's certainty. Vorax had begun studying more than just their current transmissions. He had ordered a quiet, unauthorized download of Earth's history. The files painted a story of contradiction wars that burned the sky, and yet music that touched the soul, inventions that could save lives or destroy them depending on the hands that held them. They had built cities from dirt, reached space without guidance, fought each other endlessly, but still came together when it mattered most. Every time they were pushed to the edge of extinction by disease, by disaster, by their own mistakes, they adapted, they survived, and somehow they grew stronger. Vorax could not understand how a species so chaotic had not collapsed under the weight of its own destruction. Something deep within him whispered that there was more to these humans than the Council understood. Below, on Earth, no one knew that a final decision was being weighed just beyond the sky. The secret alliances between nations had strengthened, not from trust, but from necessity. Ancient rivalries were pushed aside as the reality of an unknown threat united enemies who had once stood at the brink of war. Scientific minds across borders now worked together without credit or glory, decoding alien tech, predicting movement in space, trying to understand what kind of beings were watching them. In Tokyo, Dr. Sora Nakamura had been monitoring the alien frequency, and for the first time, she noticed something remarkable: silence. The watchers had stopped transmitting, stopped scanning, as if they were waiting. That terrified her more than any signal. It meant the watchers were no longer gathering data. It meant they were thinking. And if beings that advanced were thinking, it meant a decision was near. She rushed to send another signal, more complex this time, layered with peaceful intent, but also with a human touch: images of Earth, of people laughing, crying, building, dreaming. It was risky, but she believed that emotion might reach them where words could not. Up in orbit, Vorax received the new signal. He watched as the data unfolded into visuals primitive by Empire standards, but oddly powerful. He saw children playing under the sun, a firefighter saving someone from burning ruins, a violinist lost in the beauty of music, a mother holding her newborn child. These were not images of power or technology, they were moments of life. Vorax had seen many species and many cultures, but never had he witnessed one so broken and yet so full of hope. He began to wonder what would happen if the Empire destroyed them, not just to Earth, but to the Empire itself. Would they become monsters feared across the stars, destroyers of potential rather than protectors of peace? His second-in-command, Commander Threx, confronted him in private. The Council grows impatient. They suspect delay. If you do not act, they will replace you, Vorax replied calmly. If we act too soon, we may make the greatest mistake in our history. Threx, bound by duty but not without thought, said nothing more. Deep inside, he too had begun to feel that Earth was not like the others. The High Council, sensing Vorax's hesitation, sent a direct override. They were ready to fire the Judgment Beacon, a device that would cause Earth's sun to release a controlled burst enough to fry the planet's surface without damaging the solar system. It would be a clean elimination, erasing a threat before it could grow. But at the very moment the countdown began, a small Earth ship launched from a hidden base near Antarctica, carrying Colonel Rhodes and the theoretical device meant to disable alien tech. It was humanity's last card, a desperate move that might never reach its target. But as the ship approached the outer edge of orbit, something unexpected happened. The Empire's fleet did not fire. They watched. Vorax had ordered all weapons to hold. He transmitted a single message to the Council: "Let me speak to them." It was madness. The Empire never spoke to primitives. But the Council, curious to see if Vorax would succeed or fail, gave him minutes to try. For the first time in history, a message was sent from the Empire's flagship to Earth, directed at the source of the peaceful signals, Dr. Sora's lab. The message was simple, translated into Earth's language through AI interpretation. "Why do you reach out when you know we may destroy you?" Dr. Sora, heart pounding, replied, "Because we believe understanding is stronger than fear. If you destroy us, you'll never know who we could become. If you speak to us, you may learn who we really are." There was silence. Then, the countdown to Earth's destruction was cancelled. For now, in that moment, across both worlds, something shifted. The Empire had hesitated. Earth had spoken. And the galaxy, once indifferent to this small blue planet, now watched with new eyes. The warships remained, the threats still real, but for the first time, there was a thin thread of possibility of dialogue, of future, of peace. Vorax knew it wouldn't last long. The Council would soon demand proof, results, control. But he had bought Earth time. Humanity. The galaxy held its breath as the silence after the first true communication between humanity and the Empire rippled through the darkness of space. Across distant star systems and hidden worlds, beings of unimaginable forms and cultures stopped to listen, their sensors picking up the faint traces of a conversation that should never have happened, a primitive world speaking back to a power older than its continents. The Council, cloaked in arrogance and the weight of centuries of control, demanded answers, but even their cold logic was shaken. Never before had a planet marked for destruction managed to delay its own end with nothing more than words, images, and raw emotion. In the depths of the Empire's capital world, the ancient core of the High Council chamber buzzed with urgent whispers as leaders questioned their own assumptions. Could Earth be an exception? Was there something in humans that the models had failed to predict? In their effort to control chaos, had they overlooked the one species whose strength came not from order but from adaptation? Vorax stood firm in his decision, though he knew the consequences might be severe. Disobeying the Council was unthinkable, but sparing Earth had revealed something even more unthinkable: the Empire's fear. For centuries they had kept peace through dominance, but now they faced a species that responded not with surrender or violence, but with resilience and curiosity. On Earth, the world had changed overnight. The skies still held no visible threat, but humanity now knew, without doubt, that something far more powerful was watching them. World leaders tried to control the narrative, but the truth spread faster than any government could contain. The message from space, the peaceful reply from Earth, and the sudden stop in alien activity had become global news. For the first time in human history, every country stared at the same stars with the same thought: they are out there and they are listening. In underground bunkers, inside think tanks, aboard military installations, and even in small homes with just a radio tuned to static, people waited to see what would happen next. Would there be a second message? Final decision? Or was this just the calm before extinction? But then something extraordinary occurred, not on Earth, but across the stars. A different alien race, far from the Empire's reach, intercepted fragments of the human reply. They were not enemies of the Empire, nor allies, just watchers, traders, explorers who had long stayed neutral in galactic affairs. But what they heard sparked interest. These humans, barely crawling into space, had sent out a message not filled with fear or submission, but with the truth of who they were. It reminded the watchers of their own past, chaotic, violent, but full of dreams. Slowly, they began broadcasting Earth's message farther, not to warn others, but to ask a question that echoed louder than any command: should they be destroyed or given a chance? Soon, other civilizations joined the conversation. Small, scattered races who had once been silenced by the Empire now listened and wondered. Earth's message, originally meant for just one fleet, was now being replayed across trade channels, pirate networks, science arrays, and forgotten worlds. Vorax learned of this unexpected spread and realized something deeper was happening. Humanity had not only spoken to the Empire, they had unknowingly reached the entire galaxy. And the galaxy, tired of fear and quiet oppression, was responding. The Council grew angry, seeing their control slipping, and ordered the fleet to finish the mission before the situation grew worse. But by then, it was already too late. Ships from other species began arriving near Earth, not in war, but in observation. They hovered at safe distances, sending signals, recording transmissions, wanting to understand the species that had brought hesitation into the heart of the Empire. For the first time, Earth was not alone. The people of Earth didn't know what these new visitors wanted, but they knew one thing: if the Empire struck now, the galaxy would witness it. Humanity had become more than a threat. They had become a symbol. In her small lab, Dr. Sora Nakamura received a burst of transmissions from unknown languages and attempted translations. She cried when she realized what they were: greetings, curiosity, even hope. Other races were now reaching out. The images Earth had sent of laughter, struggle, creativity had moved something in those distant minds. Her team worked non-stop, trying to respond, even as military forces struggled to keep order on the planet below. People panicked, prayed, rebelled, or rejoiced, depending on what they believed, but everyone, for the first time, felt like part of something bigger. The stars no longer felt cold. They felt alive. And then came the final moment. The Empire's command ship sent out one last transmission to Earth. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Do not rise with arrogance. The stars are watching, but we will not destroy you yet. It was a thin line between mercy and menace, but to Orcs, it was a win. The humans had been spared for now. The message had bought them time. Time to grow, time to unite, and time to prepare for what would come next. And though the threat had not vanished, something else had begun to spread across the galaxy, an idea that maybe, just maybe, this chaotic, emotional, stubborn species called humans had a place among the stars. And as Earth's signal continued to travel through the vacuum of space, bouncing from system to system, passed through by strange hands and eyes, it carried not only the voice of humanity, but the weight of a new question. What if they are not the danger, but the hope?